From tweeting people to buy stock and then later announcing his development on taxes, if people are pissed about insider trading here at the House, look at what's happening at the White House right now and with the Republican Party.
Do you think he knew what he was doing when he sent out that message about stocks before he made the announcement?
It sure seemed like he did. I don't think that it was a coincidence. I don't think that Trump just coincidentally said buy stocks and then shortly later made an announcement that dramatically inflated and dramatically raised a lot of these asset prices. And, you know, I've heard murmurings on the floor that there may have been people that knew that this was coming.
Our opening clip was Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling out Congress and the White House for insider trading. Once you become an elected official, you should not hold stocks. Full stop. Martha Stewart went to prison for insider trading because world famous misogynist James Comey was determined to get her. But also, it's against the law. Meanwhile, the majority of members of Congress magically continue to outperform the market. And now you have Trump, who told people on social media hours before pausing his disastrous tariffs to buy stock. And that, of course, begs the question, how many people around him did he tell privately? That's insider trading. How much money did Trump and the oligarchs supporting him make off of this global economic chaos? Well, Bloomberg News gives us an idea. This is according to Bloomberg News, the world's richest people added $304 billion to their combined net worth, the largest one-day gain in the history of the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, after Trump pledged to pause tariffs for some countries. And to underline that point, here's Trump in the Oval Office bragging about how much money his chaos made billionaires.
This is Charles Schwab. It's not just a company, it's actually an individual. And he made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. That's not bad, because he's a
financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin, not one to get blue MAGA resistant street fighter, said that this really seems like insider trading and posed these important questions to Mark Ueda, acting chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission.
You know, given what the government about, and I don't know where you stand on this, because you're going to say we don't regulate these folks, but, you know, given what the government's been doing and this administration's been doing, it would not shock me, and I hate to speculate, if we were to find out that a whole bunch of people who work in Washington as our elected leaders, one way or the other, ultimately sold stocks last week, or potentially worse than that, shorted the market. My question to you is what you think the responsibility of the SEC is in those contexts.
Well, we have responsibility on insider trading, regardless of whether they're inside or outside of government. We have a very clearly established body of law for those who engage in acts that are prohibited by the insider trading.
But if somebody had access to the list of the tariff plan the day before the plan and decided to sell out of equities or to short the market or to do something else that I haven't thought about, right? Would that be considered inside information to you?
It potentially could. You'd have to take, again, there are two basic duties, what we call the classic insider trading theory of law, as well as the misappropriation theory of law. There are various elements of that. If those elements are satisfied, they can be subject to insider trading liability.
And do you think that also encompasses crypto? So if somebody were to decide that they were going to sell out of Ethereum or Bitcoin or of XRP or something else, would that come under your jurisdiction?
Well, I know my predecessor, Chairman Gensler, made it pretty clear that Ethereum and Bitcoin are not securities that fall within our purview. So if it involved either of those two, it would not be insider trading because it does not involve the purchase or sale.
What about an ETF of that?
So an ETF would be a security, and then one would have to, again, go through and take a look and whether or not they've satisfied the various elements that we need to do to bring an insider trading case.
Interesting.
Interesting indeed. The corruption is flowing like cheap wine at Mar-a-Lago. What do we do about it? Anything. Do anything. Show up to a Tesla protest, even if it's just you listening to music, holding up a sign. We're going to overcome this nightmare by being sand in their gears. The oligarchs think that with Trump, they're enjoying a day at the beach. But what happens at the beach? Sand gets everywhere, into everything. It completely takes over. And that is what we're doing. We are sand in their gears. Every action matters. Everything you do matters. For more on ways to resist, check out the Gaslit Nation Action Guide on gaslitnationpod.com. Joining us this coming Monday, April 14 at 4 p.m. Eastern at the Gaslit Nation Salon are Patrick Geraci and Sam Roker, senior advisors to Judge Susan Crawford's victorious Wisconsin Supreme Court campaign. We'll dive into strategies for defeating Elon Musk and the forces of oligarchy. Whether you're thinking of running for office, helping others run for office, or just want to smash the oligarchy, you won't want to miss this live taped interview. Come and drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand to join the discussion. Thank you to everyone who joins in on our Gaslit Nation salons. You shape the show. To join our Patreon community, sign up at patreon.com/gaslit. Discounted annual subscriptions are available, and you can give the gift of Gaslit Nation. Yes, you can gift memberships. All that at patreon.com/gaslit. Thank you to everyone who supports the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you. Now, Americans are about to learn beyond a doubt, if it's not already clear to you, which members of the Democratic Party are controlled opposition, meaning they're paid off and or blackmailed to vote with the Republican Party. Controlled opposition might pretend like they're working for the good guys. They might say the right things, but their actions speak louder than words. Take, for instance, the Handmaid's Tale legislation proposed by MAGA Republicans, known as the SAVE Act, which could be the next Citizens United in terms of its mass destruction. The SAVE Act requires proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. Non-citizen voting is extremely rare. The SAVE Act is a tool of voter suppression. Remember, America's voter suppression crisis is unprecedented among industrialized nations. Mainstream media in America hardly ever provides this context when discussing our elections, instead covering up the crisis with the made-for-TV drama of horse race politics. But the reality is that America's gerrymandering crisis is so extreme that it gives Republicans an unfair, significant advantage in controlling the House, as well as state governments in GOP hostage states known as red states. It prompted the UN to issue an emergency report, which I'll link to in the show notes. Take, for instance, how Louisiana ranks last in several quality of life metrics. There's no other way for a loser like Mike Johnson to be Speaker of the House except for Republican voter suppression, including gerrymandering. Republicans like to scream about DEI and affirmative action, but it's the Republicans that need voter suppression, an unfair advantage, to come to power and stay in power. They know they cannot win on ideas alone. And this has been far too normalized in the mainstream media. Now, how would one vote if the SAVE Act becomes law? You would need a passport, a birth certificate, or some other way of proving you are a citizen. Not a driver's license, right? Because that'd be too easy. Passports are expensive. They can run you around $130, and they take at minimum several weeks to get. The same with birth certificates. I recently ordered mine and it cost over $120. The SAVE Act is essentially a poll tax. It nationalizes Jim Crow for voters across the nation. And it threatens to disenfranchise trans people, and millions of women whose legal names no longer match the ones on their birth certificates because they took their husband's name in marriage, as is commonly done. And now you're seeing women on social media say to each other, do not take his name. Keep your maiden name, because the SAVE Act, if they don't get in this time, Republicans are going to keep trying. So this is going to create a big shift, even in marriages. Remember, Republicans found a way to cancel the votes of 3.5 million Americans in 2024, helping Trump come back to power. We did an episode on it that I'll link to in the show notes. The SAVE Act will expand their power to suppress even more votes. It's as destructive to our democracy as Citizens United, which allowed unlimited money to flood our elections, helping usher in this age of oligarchy. Elon Musk is in power because of Citizens United, and Elon Musk may stay in power because of the SAVE Act. So if you want to know whether Trump will enact martial law, send the military into the streets, or have his ICE Gestapo disappear even more people, dictatorship in America will continue to take the form it's already taking, especially if enough Democrats join with Republicans to pass the SAVE Act. In other words, don't wait for a dictatorship to announce itself here in America. It's already here. The frog has been boiling in the pot thanks to Republican voter suppression and so many in the media normalizing it. Democrats can stop the SAVE Act in the Senate unless Chuck Schumer is being blackmailed. He changed his mind about joining the rest of his party leadership and standing up to Trump in that big budget battle. So he could cave again and allow enough Democratic votes, only around 10 are needed, to pass the SAVE Act in the Senate, which would make it law because Trump would sign it right away. 4 Democratic members of Congress voted for it in the House. I'll link to an article naming names. So if you want to know who among the Democratic Party establishment is controlled opposition, this vote in both the House and the Senate will confirm it. What should you do? Well, we have to call the Democratic senators who folded on the big budget battle. I will list their names in the show notes. You can find them there. And we should call on AOC to primary Schumer or Kirsten Gillibrand, the 2 worthless New York senators who are not meeting this moment. Schumer and Gillibrand treat working in Congress like they're clocking into a call center as the least helpful people in customer service. We need and deserve better, New York. It's time for AOC to rise up. I know it's very distressing. I know this is very Handmaid's Tale. I know that women especially are having conversations saying they're coming for us. They are coming for us. They're repealing our right to vote. This is an avenue towards that. I know. But we're going to fight on. Again, TeslaTakedown.com, TeslaTakedown.com. We're sanding their gears. The people have power. The people are the power. Never forget that. Now, for something fun and different this weekend, here's Gaslit Nation's special guest, Adrian Kedetnitsky, taking the Gaslit Nation Self-Care Q&A. Adrian has been on the front lines fighting for democracy, both at home and abroad. In his critically acclaimed book, Battleground Ukraine, Adrian traces Ukraine's struggle for independence from the fall of the Soviet Union to Russia's genocidal invasion today, drawing important lessons for protecting democracies worldwide. He has worked alongside civil rights legend Bayard Rustin and the AFL-CIO, the largest federation of unions in America. He also supported Poland's solidarity movement, which helped bring down the Iron Curtain, and played a key role along with iconic Soviet dissident writer and Czech statesman Václav Havel in preserving Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in the 1990s, when many thought the Cold War had ended. Okay, I want to just wrap this up by doing some rapid fire questions called the Gaslit Nation Self-Care Q&A, where we ask our guests their recommendations for cultural enjoyment to help us lift up our minds and spirits to get through this time. It's 10 rapid fire questions. Just answer with the first thing that comes to your mind, to your heart, and just let your soul sing through your answers. So question number 1. What book should everyone read and why? Other than, of course, Battleground Ukraine.
It's not self-serving, so my name is Adrian, but Marguerite Yourcenar's The Memoirs of Hadrian. And actually, it may have some lessons. It's an attempt Hadrian is a kind of an anti-Trump. He is an authoritarian leader. He is an emperor, but he is an emperor with a deep heart and a deep soul who understands the predicament of his time and the limits of what he can accomplish versus the much more open-minded vision of the world. And it was written as a kind of a memoir that both recreates a sense of the period, but in the psychology of people. And it's one of the most brilliant books. She was a member of the French Academy, but she ended up dying in Maine. So she's a kind of half American author. So that's my all-time favorite book.
What documentary should everyone watch and why?
The most fetching documentaries are like, there was a documentary that I think French television did on James Baldwin. I think at a time where we try to build walls among each other, to see this incredibly humane, gifted intellectual and deep thinker, and to feel his personality. And he's both gay and Black. And at that moment, he's kind of alienated and exiled from the United States, which I think is available online. That would be what I would recommend. I can't tell you the specific documentary, but Google them. And I think Eddie Deeper documentary, which has a lot of James Baldwin in it, is a wonderful thing to watch.
What dramatic film with a screenplay? What dramatic film is a must-see other than Mr. Jones?
The Childhood of a Leader, which is this film by Brady Corbet, which is both psychologically interesting. It shows how a difficult child becomes the core of an authoritarian, a cog in the authoritarian machine, but which has a fabulous 7 or 8 minute nonverbal conclusion, which gives you a sense of a dictatorship coming into power and preparing some kind of a nefarious grab for full control over a society. And it's done without words, just with images and music and so on. So I would say that would be the Childhood of a Leader, which is a film made in 2015 by the director of The Brutalist.
I love that film. Who are your historical mentors and why?
I had the privilege of working alongside Bayard Rustin, who was the architect of the 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King, for jobs and freedom, jobs first, freedom second, with an interesting combination, who was the person who introduced the ideas of nonviolent struggle to Martin Luther King, who had gone to India and had learned from Gandhi and his movement and brought those ideas into the civil rights movement. He then became an important civil rights leader who, because he was gay, was also prevented from taking the top leadership post, but was also behind the scenes as a great organizer and theoretician of the civil rights movement. And then he became a great champion of freedom movements, very active in efforts to help refugees fleeing Cambodia and other totalitarian environments, and was then involved through me also in the freedom movements in Central and Eastern Europe. But I learned a lot at his side. I spent 4 happy years working on civil rights and labor issues related to African Americans and minorities more broadly with him. And it was just a pleasure through him to see this dedication, to see his diversity of interests, the fact that he was interested in culture and the arts as much as he was in the political struggle. There was a great mentorship. And then the other person was Lane Kirkland, who was the head of the AFL-CIO. I learned a lot. I was given the privilege to have access to a lot of powerful people by representing the American labor movement, including the entire leadership of the U.S. House when we were pushing for a much larger aid package after the fall of communism in Central and Eastern Europe, and being able, through the AFL-CIO, to help build the National Endowment for Democracy, to do the stuff with the radios, to help freedom movements, mainly in Eastern Europe. So those were the 2 people who I think had the biggest impact on my career, my life path, and my understanding of issues.
Wow. That's incredible. I didn't know that. I didn't know all that. I mean, your whole background is so diverse to begin with, and and learning more and more. What is the best concert you've ever been to?
Well, I was at Woodstock.
Oh, what? The original Woodstock?
Yeah, the original Woodstock.
Okay, that's a whole other interview.
I was very young. I was there.
You were like 12.
Almost preteen, yes. There was a Ukrainian summer camp nearby. So for 2 of the nights, I didn't stay there throughout. We would like come in early in the morning, walk a few miles from where we parked the cars, spend 12 hours at the concert, go back. I did it for 2 of the 3 days, but now I can't remember exactly when I was there, because when you see the movie so many times, you forget whether the memory you have of each of the performances. I mean, I have a bit of a sense of when I was there because of the time frame, but I sometimes get confused of who I saw and who I didn't see.
And what was your impression of that as a child?
Well, I was a child. I was like a young lad. I was excited about all this freedom. I thought it was so cool that people were just taking their clothes off and jumping into a brook or a little rivulet and and swimming. It was part of a cultural moment. And of course, there was propaganda from the microphones because people were, like, we're the second largest city in New York, and we're da-da-da. And you're sort of thinking the people there at that moment were convincing themselves of the cultural importance of this thing. And it wasn't just hype. It was real. And there were some problems there. There were overdoses, and there were medical emergencies and those kinds of things. But in general, it was blissfully peaceful, and people were friendly and supportive of each other, even amid, there was a lot of rain, a lot of mud on the latter days. People could have gotten mean and nasty, but they were very friendly with each other. So it was wonderful, and just seeing all this stuff